Hey guys, Angela here with Real Life Access and the fourth installment in our Mythbuster series. Because if we're going to educate about accessibility, we gotta bust some of these myths surrounding disability. And this one is the depression myth. And I had to do some thinking before I tackled this myth because it's easy to be when you're first, let me explain what the depression myth is before I get into the conundrum. So the depression myth is based on the assumption that people with disabilities are naturally depressed about having their disability, that the disability is causing is depression, anger. Um, it's the further assumption that any depression and anger that someone with a disability has is naturally attributed to their disability. Now, I've been a blind person for 42 years. I've had a significant hearing loss for 42 years. Is it annoying? Yes, sometimes it's annoying. Um, but I was born blind. I was born with the hearing loss. So I don't have any of those issues associated with it. I'm perfectly well adjusted. So it's easy for somebody like me to be flippant about the depression myth, and sometimes I do try to diffuse it with humor. But there's also some really complicated psychological stuff going on. Because like all myths, the depression myth is based on a sometimes truth. So here's the deal. Disability in and of itself does not have to be traumatic. Oftentimes it isn't. But there is trauma associated, and sometimes that comes from how one acquires a disability. So if there's an accident, if there's a sudden disability, but it also comes from grief over what you've lost. So say you've been a sighted person for 40 years and you suddenly went blind. You would naturally grieve the loss of eyesight. You would naturally have to adjust to doing things a different way. But that's not the same as the blindness in and of itself being traumatic. The adjustment to the blindness, maybe the thing that caused the blindness, is traumatic, like any other loss. So the assumption that people with disabilities are inherently depressed about their life because of their disabilities is based on what would I do? How would I feel if I had this disability? But what they're missing is two things. They're missing the fact that a grieving process is not forever. A grieving process is for a season. And yes, there will be grief, there will be tears. And the person may well go through a phase where they hate life, but then they come out of it. They talk to other people with disabilities. They learn how to do the things that they once did. And ultimately, God willing, they construct a life for themselves outside of their disability. It may not be the life they used to have, but there is a happy, productive, fulfilling life on the other side of disability. So where do we go from here? How do you respond in a situation if you think someone is if you feel sorry for somebody, if your reaction is to feel sorry for somebody who has a disability, suspend it. Watch how they respond to their disability. If they are cavalier about it, as I am, if they're nonchalant about it, then there's a very good chance your pity is unwarranted. We have a course on relationships. It's on our website, and it goes through something really similar to the 5 stages of grief when it comes to disability, and it it mirrors the 5 stages of grief, I should say. And if you want to know how to support someone who has just acquired a disability, I would urge you to take a look at that course. I would also urge you to talk to people who have gone through the transition because those of us, I've been blind all my life. I have no idea what it's like to lose my vision suddenly. I can sympathize, but I can't truly empathize. But don't assume if you see somebody, a seemingly well-adjusted person with a disability, don't assume that they're going through it. And don't assume either, because we all go through it sometimes. We all have days where we doubt ourselves, where we lack confidence, where we feel like we're just not up to this thing called life that we're all going through. And if your friend with a disability is going through something like that, don't assume that it's because of their disability. When people assume that, oftentimes, problems, depression gets misdiagnosed and doesn't get treated because you're treating the wrong problem. If I'm sad because I had a death in the family, if I'm sad because I've had a horrible week on the job and I feel like I can't do anything right. If I'm sad because I'm just doubting myself, that has nothing to do with disability. If somebody with a disability is angry, don't assume that they're angry because they have a disability. They may be angry because their disability is misunderstood, but that is totally different from being angry because you have a disability. I hope that I promoted understanding here. It's easy for somebody who's well adjusted to disability to make fun of the depression myth. Um, I chose not to go that route, but I want to end with a humorous anecdote because I want to leave you in a happier place than where we are now. So, when I was working for the college a few years ago, I had the student come in, just the sweetest young lady you could ever want to meet. I mean, just super nice person. So we were talking, and somehow the subject of driving came up, right? And I said, "Well, you know why God made me blind, right?" And in a very sympathetic voice, he said, "Well, if you want to talk about it." And I said, "God made me blind because he knew what kind of driver I'd be. For the sake of all of you out there on the road." I'm not sure she knew quite what to do with that. Um, I hope she saw the humor in it. Um, and I also hope that I was able to show her that blindness for me is not a source of distress. Though it may be for others, it is not for me. Okay, folks, well, that is the depression myth. Next time we're going to tackle the charity myth. This idea that people with disabilities are inherently in need of charities. So stay tuned for that, and I will catch you later.